I think we've just heard some of the most profound presentations we're likely to hear through this conference, because we can have social media and museums and all kinds of wonderful things, but if we don't get these things right, we won't have any of those things. But I'm here to tell you a slightly different version of this, which is that this may be actually the greed end of the discussion this afternoon. And the greed end is that there's going to be a lot of jobs and a lot of wealth created from being part of the solution. And I'm going to throw up a few slides to show you the kind of level of activity that's going on in what I would call clean tech innovation. And the world is a dramatically different place than 8 years ago when we coined this term clean tech and people thought we were in the dry cleaning business. In fact, we did buy our domain name, cleantech.com, from a dry cleaner in Iowa for $10,000 in 2004, and arguably that's the best investment I've ever made. So let's just get to what I would call a definition of clean technology, but even that is perhaps false. Many of us who are new to this space will think clean tech is wind, solar, maybe biofuels. And indeed, that is part of what I would call clean technology, but it is perhaps a small slice of the overall clean tech pie, because we're going to have to learn to do more with less, or to redesign our very processes along the kinds of things that we've already heard from my fellow panelists. But we're going to have to learn to use resources more productively, reduce or eliminate our ecological impact, and of course, add economic value. And if that's the case, then that impacts virtually every sector of the global economy, leading to a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. Indeed, people like Siemens of Germany and HSBC, the global bank, estimate that just getting to a low-carbon economy by 2020 represents a 2.5 trillion to 4 trillion euro opportunity, and will likely represent roughly 15, if not 20% of the GDP of an economy like Germany. So clean tech is much broader than renewables, but of course includes renewables. And so I'm a venture capitalist by background, and so I often look at the venture capital data that our own group produces as almost like a proxy for where the innovation is going. I'm a Canadian, and my hero in Canada is a guy called Wayne Gretzky, a very famous ice hockey player. And he always said that his success was knowing not where the puck, the little rubber thing that you play with in hockey, not where the puck is, but where the puck is going. So you have to be careful with your P's and F's. But what venture capital shows us is where the puck is going. And we've gone from virtually no venture capital in this space at the beginning of this past decade to now clean tech venture capital investments is the largest piece of the overall venture capital pie. Bigger than software, bigger than medical devices. Roughly 30% of all US venture capital, including in Silicon Valley, is going into this space. So venture capital is a proxy, and I might add, since we're in this room today, that clean tech venture capital is probably the most Sharia compliant thing you could invest in anywhere in the world. So we've seen many, many top companies emerge. We run this thing called the Clean Tech 100, which is private companies, and we see that most of the innovation still is coming from the United States, although it is now spreading rapidly around the world. If you look at major corporations, they've moved from what one might have called risk management, keeping the CEO out of trouble, through to sort of stakeholder engagement. Now corporations are putting a lot of money to work in this space, and you can see them buying many of these young companies. Major corporations like GE, Siemens, ABB, but most of the major chemical companies in Europe, North America, and even Asia are now spending $30, $40 billion a year acquiring young clean tech companies around the world. So if you look also at IPOs. Last year was a record year for initial public offerings of clean tech companies, although 8 of the 10 top IPOs were Chinese companies. So that's an indicative of perhaps where the future lies. But over 40 billion in IPO activity in the last 5 years in clean tech. And if you look at the public markets and how that's playing out in terms of pure clean tech companies, we run something called the Clean Tech Index, which has a combined market cap of about $360 billion, about 75 companies around the world. It includes the renewable companies, but is much broader than that. And if you look at the performance, it has, over the past 4 years, while the performance has not been brilliant, roughly 4.5%, it has outperformed the S&P 500, and it has also outperformed the more pure play clean tech indices. So really, this is now something that, as investors, one can get one's arms around. There's opportunities to invest in. Over 2,000 startups and growth stage companies have been financed over the last 8 to 10 years, and much of that innovation is now coming to scale. So what's most interesting, and being on the panel here with colleagues from Africa and North America and so on, is that this is probably the first global innovation revolution. Mathematics started, of course, in this part of the world, gunpowder in China, the Industrial Revolution in Europe, and the information technology revolution in North America. But clean tech is happening simultaneously at warp speed in virtually every part of the world. And so the question here in the GCC and in the kingdom is, what is going to be your role in this next wave of job and wealth creation? So the good news is, of course, here in the kingdom, is that you've got a focus on 10 by 10, knowledge-based industries, and you can benefit from the kinds of breakthroughs that have been out there in biotech, material science, and in information technology to move forward in the emerging clean economy and benefit from the convergence of these technologies and new ideas, or relatively new for the modern world, ideas of biomimicry and so on. And so many of the best opportunities are based on this convergence. So, for example, up until fairly recently, the information technology world and the world of sustainability have been two separate spaces, as it were. But now we're seeing the venture capital going into everything from smart buildings to smart grids to smart systems in general, data, software, analytics, and sensors, now coming into the clean tech world and seeing the amount of capital that's going into that rising rapidly, while the majors like Cisco, Microsoft, SAP are also turning a considerable part of their resources to this. And we saw this recently in Saudi Arabia with IBM coming in here, joint venturing around nanotech, but also using information technology as the underpinning, enabling technology. So what has accelerated the emergence of the global green economy or clean economy has been the Great Recession, what I would call the Great Pause, the chance to rethink everything, and about 600 billion of the over $3.5 trillion invested in stimulus was invested in green and clean, with Asia taking about 2/3 of it. And if you go to a country like Korea, where I spend time advising the government right now, 2% of their GDP over the next 5 years will be invested in clean and green, high-speed rail to solar energy, and LEDs and other things. But what's interesting is that they're building off their stimulus package. 80% of it went into clean and green. So we've seen the Koreans do it once, and I think they're going to do it again in clean technology. If I move forward here, my second last slide, the race is underway. Whether or not we get a global carbon regime and even a price on carbon seems to be secondary. The clean tech area emerged in the United States under the regime of President George Bush. I don't think he was known to be a tree hugger. or a major environmental advocate. What is driving this is raw price signals and the awareness that technology has improved and is improving out of all recognition. And so around the world, we're seeing people start to grasp this. And my hope and my expectation and wish is that with the launch of the Greenovation initiative here in Saudi Arabia, you will go back to your roots. After all, Islam is the first green religion, and your roots of understanding the relationship of nature to technology, to society, and the philosophical principles. And I think you have many assets here in the kingdom that may not exist elsewhere in the GCC, which give you a huge competitive advantage in doing so. Perhaps we can come back to that later. So without further ado, shukran, let's get the conversation going.
Thank you very much.